So, Sprocket is a game that I have not touched on this YouTube channel in a pretty long time. I mean, geez, when was the last time I actually made a proper Sprocket video? Jesus, has it been that long? Well, although I haven't been making any videos on Sprocket, that isn't to say that Sprocket hasn't been under development. A lot of people have actually been asking me to make update videos on Sprocket or just general covering the new features of the game, but Sprocket is an amazing game and I love it very much, but it's not really what this channel is all about. I'm not a Sprocket YouTuber, so I'll leave that sort of stuff to the Sprocket professionals. Another reason why I've never really made a lot of Sprocket videos is due to something that I actually mentioned in one of my previous Sprocket videos. I think it was my teabag challenge. I'm a little bit creatively bankrupt when it comes to Sprocket. I just don't really know what to do in the game. There's so many things I could do, I don't really know what. So for today's video, I had a really interesting idea, although I should already clarify that it's not my idea. I actually got this idea from Matt Lowne, who is a Kerbal Space Program YouTuber. He did a video quite recently involving Kerbal Space Program 2 and ChatGPT. Really interesting video if you want to go check it out. I'll leave a link in the video. I think it would be there, probably. Not there, that way. To check out his video, and I'm basically just going to take his concept. So what exactly did he do? Well, we all know that ChatGPT is one of the most advanced AIs that you can actively talk to here on the internet, and a lot of people have been using it to write code for them, do essays, homework, things like that, but Matt Lowne had a really interesting idea to have ChatGPT make him missions in Kerbal Space Program 2. He basically asked the AI, hey, pretend that you are the head of this Kerbal Space Center in my game and give me objectives and missions to do in Kerbal Space Program. And it actually outlined these really interesting missions for him in pretty immense detail. So I figured, if we can make ChatGPT create missions in Kerbal Space Program, why can't we have it design us a tank? Now, AI design tanks is also something I've gotten a lot of requests to do a video on, so I guess I'll kill two birds with one stone here, but it's always been something like going on to, back when DALL-E was big and people were doing AI art of stuff, I didn't want to just ask the AI to make me a wacky tank. I wanted to make use of ChatGPT's most interesting feature, in my opinion, roleplay. That came out wrong. I wanted to instruct ChatGPT to pretend that they were the head of an armored board in a fictional nation and I'm the tank manufacturer. I wanted them to roleplay and give me specifications to design a tank around based on the situation of our nation, the time period we're in, and what the needs of the nation and the army are. All of which would be decided by ChatGPT through this roleplay. And for my money, I think I got some really, really cool results. So first thing I decided to do was just sort of talk to ChatGPT and figure out how much it already knew. I know that ChatGPT, one of the interesting things about it is that it remembers the previous things that it said to you. It remembers your conversation as it goes, and it can call back on previous context. I was asking it some pretty basic questions. Sadly, I think because ChatGPT, they stopped feeding information to it in 2021, so anything after 2021, it actually isn't familiar with. So it actually didn't know Sprocket, so I decided to go through the effort of explaining Sprocket to the AI, the concept of the game. This is actually my first time ever doing a video format like this, where I just kind of sit in front of this video and just do commentary. I'm watching this video in real time, but obviously I'm going to be doing cuts and speeding stuff up and doing whatever, so this is going to be interesting to see how I get the timing of this to work out. So this is the first prompt I gave the AI. I knew that the AI was going to work better the more specific you were, so I had no problem writing up this huge paragraph, but I basically described the following scenario. The year is 1938, you are the head of the armor board of a fictional nation in World War II, we need a new tank to combat the German threat, give me the specifications. Of course, I went into detail about what the AI should be thinking about and how it should approach this, but I didn't want this to be too difficult, so I did specify that budget and time were not constraints. Assume I can build this tank instantly and with infinite money. However, technological and physical boundaries are still in play. Now, for this specific prompt, I specified that this fictional nation was somewhere between Soviet Union and the Poland. It's kind of getting that Eastern European influence that I just thought would be interesting for this prompt. And also, I just have a soft spot for Poland. People who are fans of the channel would know this. Now, spoiler alert, I actually end up doing 2 more prompts after this, and kind of one of the only major things that I changed between the prompts, besides some minor tweaks to just being more specific and getting more of what I wanted out of what the AI was going to answer, was what nation, or I guess what area of Europe the nation was going to be sat in. Now, right away, there were a couple of things I was going to have to take into consideration with this build. Firstly was the size of the tank, which the AI did actually specify. The tank would have to be no larger than 5.5 meters in length, 2.5 meters in width, and 2.5 meters in height. As the AI explained, to make it easier to transport by rail and maneuver in tight spaces, which, hey, thumbs up from me for having historical reasoning behind the AI's decision. So I should mention for reference that I'm going to be watching all of this footage back at 600 times speed, and this video is still, that I've got sitting in front of me here, is still half an hour long, so there will be a lot of cutting, especially if I want to fit 3 tank designs in this. But you can see me messing around here mostly with the height and just general dimensions of the tank. Thank God Sprocket actually gives you in the information tab when freeform hulls, it actually tells you exactly how long, how wide, and how tall your tank is overall once all is said and done. And that was incredibly useful for this build because I wanted to make sure, obviously, that I wasn't going above the limit that the AI had set for me. So the weirdest thing I'm doing right now is fucking around with the hull. I wanted it to be unique, but I also wanted it to look good. Like you can see here, I'm experimenting with this weird like bow tie, like crimped top piece. I don't know why, but I did that and I was like, hey, that's cool and unique, so I just kind of stuck with it. And then I started doing all sorts of weird stuff here at the top. I wanted some kind of like tiered, layered look to it. I was really trying to avoid creating a T-34. I obviously wanted it to look Eastern European, but I didn't want to just build a T-34, especially since the AI actually did call for sloping of this armor. I think that even the AI was basically trying to ask me to build a T-34, also with the engine being a 400 horsepower diesel engine, but I didn't want to do that, so I'm kind of trying my best to stay original here while also, yeah, kind of going for a T-34 aesthetic. I ultimately end up kind of making everything casted, I think just because I didn't know how to make the weird geometry I was doing with it look good with all the different edges and shapes that I was doing to it. Basically cast T-34, if that is a concept that we're all willing to stomach. The rear of the tank, I did a little bit of experimentation with something that I don't usually do in Sprocket, but I see, the professional builders do all the time, which is actually, molding pieces and parts and little bits that stick out and bits, creating things that look like they could be vents or storage bins or really interesting shapes out of the hull, instead of just actually like what I'm doing here on the rear. Like I'm kind of creating these things that are kind of going to end up being sort of vent grills at the back of the tank. There is a vent grill, decorative piece that you can put on there, but I actually formed it out of the hull of the tank. Not something that I usually do. And so this splitting was actually to build something that I did once before on another tank that I'm incredibly proud of on Sprocket. I've actually shared this build that I did on my Discord, my Centaur tank, which was basically just a Churchill but in World War I. And pretty recently I did a huge modernization of that tank because Sprocket has so many new features. And when I did the remaster for that design, I did what I'm doing right here, which is these little, I guess, bits that stick out the front. It's supposed to mimic the Sherman's 3-piece transmission. You can even see I'm putting this plank of wood on here too. Very, very Sherman-esque, right? I'm, again, trying to drive away from T-34, so I put these on there for that Sherman look. And I don't end up going with a front-mounted sprocket on here, so this isn't actually any sort of transmission cover, but it looks interesting, and I don't know, I guess you could consider it some kind of like reinforcement bar, some kind of like armored or extra strength, like ribbed strength for that front plate. When it came to suspension design, I didn't want to go too crazy. Again, I didn't want to mimic the T-34 outright. Actually, the suspension I end up with is more BT-like than anything. But yeah, I wanted to go with larger road wheels. I wanted to go with, again, some kind of Soviet-inspired, Eastern European, like clearly Christie suspension, but not Christie suspension. And actually a lot of these wheels, actually the road wheels that I'm using for this design and a lot of the other wheels that are now available in the game, were new to me as of the recording of this footage. Like I booted the game and I saw those wheels and I was like, oh wow, those are new. That rear sprocket as well, that was a new sprocket I'd never seen before in the game. So I wanted to make use of the new parts that I personally hadn't gotten my hands on yet. So those road wheels were new to me, and so that's honestly the biggest reason why I chose them. And also they look very, I think actually in Sprocket themselves they're described as based off of the cruiser tanks Cruiser Mark II, Mark III, whatever. But to me, they looked a lot more like Walter J. Christie prototype. They looked to me like Christie T3 type road wheels or something like that, which I guess is not too far off. And so for the turret, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted something curved and rounded, really for the sole reason of that I just don't usually do curvy, rounded off turrets. So I just sort of grabbed the base curvy turret template that the game has and just decided to modify that, just grabbing faces, grabbing edges, and just molding it to look not like it was just the most generic curvy turret that the game gives you slapped onto this design. Trying to be lazy without being lazy. But of course, this curvy turret is an obvious callback to T-3485. It definitely looks much more T-3485 than anything else. And then also having a casted, more curvier hull, I just kind of thought it fit the theme. And again, it's a little bit different than what this would be. This design would really more be based off of a T-34 1940 production or 1941 production, an early model T-34. Because you have to remember the year is 1938 as of the making of this design. So if this is going to look like any tank, it's going to be comparable to, early war tanks, interwar tanks, really. I'm armoring the tank at this point. ChatGPT gave me the armor specifications. We wanted 50 millimeters at the front and 30 millimeters on the sides. I think I end up in a couple places going with 60 millimeters because I can afford to because of the weight. ChatGPT did not give me any specific weight restriction, at least for this prompt. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So I wasn't too worried about the weight, and there was no speed restriction either. There was no sustained speed, rather, that the tank should be able to reach. No maximum speed, no minimum speed. So the tank didn't have to be the fastest, didn't have to be the greatest, didn't have to be the lightest. And I figured, why not? So the AI called for 50 millimeters at the front. I think, again, in a couple places, I went for 60. Here, placing the gun finally. So the gun is going to have to be a 75, which actually does make sense. The Soviet Union is putting a 76 millimeter cannon in T-34s at this point. 1938, you're kind of at the beginning stages of the transition from what was originally the BT-20 project, but is now at this time the A-20, evolving into the A-32, and A-34 comes around in 1939, if I'm not mistaken. But at this time, they're putting a 76 millimeter gun into these T-34 prototypes. So a 76 millimeter gun for your medium tank, even in 1938, is actually not that far-fetched. Ammunition stowage was a major problem of this design. This was definitely the first time where I generally had to sit back and I struggled because the AI requests 75 rounds, and the way the AI kind of said it implied so that the ammunition should be stowed in the turret. It didn't really say that, like, oh, blank number of ammunition in the turret, blank number of ammo in the hull. It just kind of said the gun should be in the turret should have armor, and the gun should have up to 75 shells. And so that was really, really weird for me to put into this curvy shaped turret that I had made. I had kind of boxed myself in here, and this was really the first time that I sat back and was like, well, shit, like, the AI has given me this requirement, and I'm struggling to fulfill it. And that kind of made me excited. It kind of made me really feel like that I was on the right track with this, that I was getting what I wanted out of this, which was a third party coming to me and saying, hey, I just need you to build this. It's up to you to figure out how, and the problems that you'll run into along the way. So I did end up making it work at the sacrifice of penetration. In order to fit the amount of shells that the AI was going to require me to in this turret that I had built, I had to decrease the length of the shells so they took up less space in the turret. So your propellant length goes down, and so your penetration goes down. So this was a really, really, again, a really fun moment of I had to sacrifice penetration and performance of this cannon so that I could fit enough ammo in the turret to meet the requirements that I was being given. So moving over to the engine deck, I have always been notoriously bad at designing engine decks in Sprocket, at least in my opinion. I always feel like I struggle. I see some of the pro designers on my Discord every fucking day and on the subreddit, and these guys can create immense, intricately detailed, and specifically engine decks, and I am always so jealous. So my general strategy when I create engine decks is to, as you can see here, use rivets, and I just sort of outline the engine deck, and then I just sort of start drawing shapes in the deck with rivets, and then I just sort of fill in those spaces that I've drawn, those shapes, with stuff, with whatever, just stuff that sort of makes sense. And as you can see now, the tank has pretty much taken on its shape. It's got the gun, it's got the mantlet, it's got the engine deck, it's pretty, at its most basic level, customized, and this is basically what the tank ends up looking like. A lot of the work that I ended up doing at this stage is all really just minor tweaking. I ended up putting the cupola on there, put the driver in there so that I can actually start taking it for test drives, and now I'm really looking at performance. Now this is engine tweaking, suspension tweaking, transmission tweaking, and this stuff is incredibly boring, incredibly tedious, by far the part that I sort of dread the most when it comes to making tanks in Sprocket. I'd like to think that I've gotten a lot better at it, especially after this exercise of designing these tanks for this video. I definitely would say that I got way better at it. And again, the AI didn't necessarily specify any specific speed or performance requirements of the tank. It only says that the engine has to reach 400 horsepower. So a lot of the tweaking that I'm doing is really just getting the tank to rev at a certain RPM and then saying, okay, well, at that RPM, can I produce 400 horsepower? And once I get the performance down, I can really start doing some fun little tweaking. You saw me there editing the ammunition racks. I really like to think about the genuine ergonomics of a vehicle when I'm designing it. I think that it's the number one thing that I think of. I really try to imagine the people in there and the people working in that tank and what life would actually be like for them operating this every single day. And you notice I do a quick little flip around on the ammunition rack there because I was trying to think about, if you're a loader, which is more convenient for you. If the shells are facing backwards, is it more convenient for you to take a shell off that way and then kind of turn your body to the left and then you kind of slam it into the breech with your left arm? Or would it be better for the shells to be facing forward and then you're taking it out of there and then you're kind of flipping it around with you and then turning your body around to throw the shells into the breech? That kind of stuff is always just really, really fun for me to think about when I'm designing tanks in Sprocket. And eventually I do end up fucking around with this front hull again because it just doesn't quite look right to me. I looked back at the AI specifications and noticed that the AI, at my request, specified that the tank should be designed with future-proofing and modernization in mind, right? That the tank should be modular and ready to accept potential upgrades and new features, turning it into a tank destroyer, turning it into an SPG. I'm thinking instantly of, T-34 being turned into Su-85. And of course, I'm now instantly sitting back looking at this tank thinking, well, this whole thing is a curved cast hull. This whole thing is one giant casted piece. Doesn't really lend itself to the best of modularity, right? If the whole thing is casted as one piece. So I kind of have this idea to make the tank a hybrid casted / riveted / welded panels. At this stage, I'm still sort of deciding what it's going to look like, but you can see I'm kind of making the front of the tank there a little bit more squared and edged off. So that way I can eventually put weld seams or rivet marks, and I can kind of make an excuse of, oh, hey, well, like, the front can come off, and we can reconfigure the hull if we so desire to fit certain requirements. And also ease of maintenance. That was another thing that I asked the AI if I should be including in this design, and the AI said, of course, yes, ease of maintenance should be a factor. And I'm thinking of the T-34 having that rear access hatch that you can just unbolt the entire back of the tank and take the whole engine out, the transmission out, all in one power pack, all in one go, and my tank didn't really lend itself to that capability. So I'm redesigning a lot of this to be more modular. In my opinion, what would seem more modular. The AI did specify a bow machine gun, so we got to put a bow machine gun in here. And then this is where I really start leaning into the modularity with the riveting. I start sort of drawing this pattern with the rivets, outlining sort of the chunk of the tank that could all theoretically be taken off as one piece. I really am kind of thinking this is like a hybrid tank where, yeah, the middle and rear hull, it is casted pieces, but it's like, 3 or 4 separate casted pieces that could be taken off. By the time I'm finished here, you can see I've got that front plate, which is all kind of one piece, so to speak, and then I've got sort of the sides, the left and right sides of the tank are casted for sure, but they're sort of like their own 2 separate casted pieces, and then the rear of the tank as well, the engine deck and the back of the tank are all another like piece. So this whole tank seems to be sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces all riveted together. Doing some basic crew optimization, making sure that all the crew is nice and comfortable, has plenty of space to work around. This is a pretty cramped tank, especially with just the turret. Honestly, this turret design, looking back on it, is just horrible, and it is pretty ugly, I'm not going to lie to you. But I think it has a charm to it. I think if this tank had a different turret, it would certainly look different, which I guess is not really an outstanding statement. AI specified lots of visibility in this tank, so I'm dropping periscopes absolutely everywhere. The AI specified radio, so we're putting a radio in there. And the AI specified that the commander should have periscopes and sighting and advanced optics and such, so I put that little periscope on top of the commander's cupola as well to satisfy that requirement. I'm very much, I have the AI, my conversation with ChatGPT open on my second monitor this whole time, and I'm really looking at, have I missed anything? Have I missed any requirements that the AI was going to give to me? And I want to make sure that I really get it right. Adding pistol ports, my beloved. I love adding pistol ports to the tank. And you actually see there that I manually move the pistol port along the side of the turret, and I'm using the X-ray to look at if it's in the way of the ammunition rack. I don't want to put the pistol port behind an ammunition rack. I want it to be in a space where the loader can slip between those two ammunition racks and actually use it. Put a coaxial machine gun on this as well, because again, AI asked for it. This gives me a moment to kind of widen the turret just a little bit more to make up for that. And then now, at this point, really, most of the functionality of the tank has been accounted for, so now it's really full decoratives. This is by far my favorite part of designing any tank in Sprocket. I absolutely love these little these ladder rung bars that Hamish added to the game. They look absolutely incredible, and you can use them for a whole slew of various purposes. You can see I've put them on the side of the tank there to act as like little handlebars, not just to help the crew with climbing up onto the tank, but of course for any infantry who decides they want to take a ride on the side of the tank, because we have to remember this is sort of Eastern European Soviet design inspired. Try my best to give it that like deep forest T-34 green, the closest I think I could get to it by just doing these colors by hand without reference photos. Slap the classic red star on there and put some extra vision slits on the sides of the turret, kind of mimicking the T-34-85. T-34-85 actually had sort of vision blocks like that. And then finally getting to the most boring but also kind of the most exciting part for me, which is decals. Especially welding decals like I'm doing here. The decals really just bring everything together. I absolutely love the fact that Hamish has allowed people to go absolutely nuts with decals in this game, and you can put any decals you want on the tanks anywhere you want them to go. It's absolutely incredible. Maximum creativity. Mess around with that concept that I was thinking of again, where you have like this welded front. This is a composite, you know? Yeah, I love the composite Sherman. Fuck you. You know, maybe that was my inspiration. I don't know. But maybe subconsciously I had the composite Sherman on my mind when I was building this tank. But I liked this idea of that the front plates are welded, and then all of these individual welded plates are assembled to create this front apparatus, and then this entire front section of the tank is bolted onto the rest of the body with this riveted outline that I've created. And I go through that mentality with all of these, where I kind of build out this like outline of welding where all the pieces have been welded together, and then each individual chunk of the tank is then riveted in place. Like the entire tank is held together by riveting, but each individual chunk of it is welded. And now at this point, like every time I kind of zoom out and you get to see the overall tank, you really get to see that this is the design. At this point, this tank is what it is, and it really just kind of looks like a T-34. it really just looks like the T-34. I think that T-34 mantlet has really brought it to that level, but I think it looks different enough. It's not exactly any specific tank. It is definitely its own tank, but you can very clearly tell where the inspiration came from, and that's really what I wanted. And best of all, that this tank meets pretty much all the requirements that the AI was asking for. It actually, in retrospect, it might be a little too tall. Maybe if that stick is 2 meters, then if you imagine that stick stacked on top of itself, and then half that, because remember 2.5 meters is the width requirements, the height requirement. So I think this actually was still within the height requirements. I'd have to go back and check. Oh yes, and then here at the back, yes, actually was another piece that the AI specified, which was the capability to deploy smoke. In section 7 with the miscellaneous features, the AI actually specified that the tank should be equipped with a radio and a smoke generator for concealment. Notice it didn't say smoke launchers like we would think, on the front of the turret. It actually specified a smoke generator. So my solution for this was to just take a box and stick it on the exhaust and then put some little smoke dispensers on that box, and that's your smoke system. And really at that point, you kind of have your finished design. Pretty quick reload. I think we're at just over 3-second reload time with this thing, which is not bad at all for a 75mm gun. We have a crew of 5, a driver, bow machine gunner, loader, commander, and gunner. So for 1938, really ahead of the curve. I mean, this really is a World War II medium tank, but in 1938. And I mean, hey, if the technology's there, I'm going to take advantage of it. The AI didn't actually specify any specific crew requirements. It didn't say that we had to have a certain number of crew members, but yeah, I figured for the tanks, just to make the tank the most efficient it could be, I gave it, all 5 crew members, I gave it the full beans. And this thing really did handle well. I got around, obviously, to testing it in whatever scenarios that I could. For the interwar, that scenario is going to be ambush. So I got together with the 2 tanks that it would allow me to spawn, and I brought it through its paces, and it did fairly well. You can see I failed the scenario a couple times, but I think that's really just to how woefully outnumbered I was for this scenario. I mean, this is literally a 6v2. And I think, again, with the sort of the balancing that I had to do with the ammunition, that I couldn't quite make it as powerful as I wanted it to be, because I couldn't make the shell casing as big as I wanted it to be, that actually, you know, that was a balancing act, that despite having a 75mm cannon all the way in 1938 as the main armament for your tank, it has kind of shit propelling capabilities and only has, I mean, I think there was, what, 70 or 80 millimeters of penetration, which is really good for 1938, don't get me wrong. But still definitely doable. You know, there's still definitely shots that will non-pen, that will break, that will ricochet. So I think that actually, again, sort of ended up being a pretty cool, natural balance mechanic for this tank, that the gun didn't end up being all that powerful. And so that just about does it for our first design. I did ask ChatGPT to name the tank, and it gave me the designation of Armored Vehicle Type 50 or Medium Tank M1, and I did not want to call this fucking thing M1, so I called it Armored Vehicle Type 50, which is obviously leaning more towards on like the Japanese-Chinese naming scheme, but you know, not really Eastern European, but I don't know, I figured it worked. And it gave me a large selection of nicknames to choose, and out of the ones that it handed to me, I thought Vanguard sounded the neatest. It also, actually, looking back at it now, it also gave me Vindicator, which is a pretty awesome nickname, as well as Ironclad, Titan, Sentinel, Warhammer. Actually, Warhammer would have also been a really, really cool name. And funny enough, it also gave me Panther, Centurion, and Crusader, which were off the list. I was not going to use any of those names. Overall, I was super happy with this design. I think the turret is pretty ugly. I don't think it's the best looking tank in the world, certainly not the best looking tank that I've ever made in Sprocket, but it was functional, you know, it worked, and it met the requirements, it met the specifications of what the AI was asking me for, and I really, really felt good coming out of this design that I actually really could make good, functional, and interesting tanks out of prompts from an AI. So I think that just about does it for our first design in this little Sprocket AI experiment that I did. And I say first design, and I mentioned sort of earlier in the video that I actually did multiple prompts of this, in fact 2 more, and made 2 more tanks to AI specifications. Like I said, the main thing that I changed was the location that this fictional nation was based in. This one was based on a Eastern European, Soviet, Poland type country. I had one prompt that was based on a Western European sort of France type vibe, French-English type vibe, and then I did one that was in the Mediterranean. I thought that was a really interesting one, and I got by far the most interesting results out of it. My original plan for this video was to include all 3 builds in one video, but as I was editing this one, I just really, really enjoyed the deep dive on the process. I think there's not a lot of channels out there, not that I watch Sprocket content regularly, but I feel like you don't often get to see every individual step and hear what someone is thinking as they design a tank. So I wanted to include all of that in this video, and by the end of it all, it was 25 minutes long, so I can't really justify making an hour-and-a-half long video about that. But of course, I'm interested in uploading the other 2 builds that I did, but let me know down in the comments below if you guys would want me to try to squeeze the next 2 builds into one more video and just cut out a lot of the fine details and just go over broad strokes, or if you would like 2 more individual videos, one on each tank. I'm still debating which one of those I should do, and let me know in the comments what you guys think. Otherwise, the main reason why I haven't uploaded anything else in so long is because I've been hard at work on a huge scale video for the T-34, another tank documentary, which is not a branch of videos that I've touched in a long time. So keep your eyes out, that is going to be coming soon, relatively soon, but if you want updates on these sorts of things, check out my Discord, alright? I give announcements on upcoming videos, I go live, I do live streams all the time. Whoa, gee whiz. Oh. That was crazy. Koopman, what was it, man? Hey, Koopman's gonna check it out, guys.
What do you see, Cooper?
Oh no! No, Koopman! No! And I talk and hang out with the community over there. So if you're tired of sitting here and waiting, and maybe you're getting sick of the cursed tank community posts, come join the Discord. There's a lot of us out here, and we have a lot of fun. That depends on what your definition of fun is, actually. It's actually kind of a hellhole. It's actually a terrible place. There's a lot of really bad stuff going on in there. jeez, I maybe should not have recommended that. Now people are going to join it. That's going to be even worse. Yikes. That was awkward. Otherwise, my name is Ed320. This is a YouTube channel about tanks and how much I fucking love them. If you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. If you like tanks, go ahead and subscribe. I don't know what you're doing. If you like tanks and you're not subscribed to me, I don't feel like that doesn't quite make any sense, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? Doesn't make any sense. So you should fix that. If you like tanks and you're not subscribed to me, it's a bit weird, don't you think? I'm sorry. I should not have gotten threatening with that. I really should not have. Either way, thanks so much for watching. Keep your eyes out. I'm gonna upload more. I promise. I'm getting back in the swing of things, and I'll see you in the next one. Was that cool? Is that... Oh. Oh. Oh no! That was lame. That was so lame.